Hello, welcome to the May 6th, 2025 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When you ask questions, realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed with the number of questions that come in. We will go through all the questions chronologically. If you don't see an immediate response to your question, we can just simply, if we could avoid asking the same question repeatedly, that would be appreciated. Several hours after the live stream ends, we should have an index of all the questions that were asked in the live stream with timestamps. When asking questions, it's also helpful if you could specify which level of Cubase you're running. So if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or if you're running on Mac or Windows as your operating system, and which version. So if it's version 12, 13, or 14, that information is often helpful in getting answers for your questions. If you wanted to search for questions that have been asked in previous live streams, there's over 39,000 topics. You could go to cubaseindex.com. We want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that great website. We have two people that serve as moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg. Employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience. We'll give special thanks to them. Also, additional statement of gratitude for Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a great resource of information for the Steinberg community. Just once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work with Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. In Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself. And with that, we will go get started. We'll probably end the live stream a little earlier than usual today, so we'll go about 3.5 hours. I have to go to a professional event in the city tonight, so we'll be ending probably in about 3.5 hours from now. With that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, we see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. His cat buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven, Mark Rabin's dog Stella, and other pets, and he's ready to learn some new tips and tricks. All right, so we have Stefan from Sweden. We have Ivan checking in from Ukraine. Thanks for joining us. We have Uno Memento, long time Steinberg user, checking in from Finland. We have Jan from Cubase Index. We see Jazz Dude. And Grant Flooring asks the first question. Why don't track presets save output data? So the concept of the track preset is that you could load the track preset into any project and it would work. So if we are, let's say if we have an audio track here, and so let's say we have this audio track. Let's see, I think we have some inserts on this. So let's say if we save this particular track, I'm going to route this to a bus. So I will come right over here. Let's add a group track to the selected track. Okay, and we'll call this Audio 07 bus. Okay. All right, let me just... We'll call it Audio 07 group. Okay, so I'm going to save this track as a preset. So let's say this track we have, sorry, we'll just have this set over here. So let's say this track I have In Audio 5, I have some plugins, and let's say I have its group channel here. Okay, so now when I save these together, so the track preset, the intention is that I could, even though this is being loaded into a project, I'm going to save this track preset. So we'll right click and we'll say save track preset, and we'll call this May 6, 2025. Okay, so now I do a new project. So if I want to load in that particular track with all of its settings, and we go to new, we'll add a track using the track preset, and we will come over and say May 6, 2025. So if there is no bus that is activated, we still want this track to be able to sound. If we want to save a track with its routing, we wouldn't do it as a track preset because the track preset isn't tied to the particular routing. So if I'll come right over here and I'll activate this project. And if I wanted to save like that track with its routing, what we could do is I'm going to come over, and then we could go to your file menu and choose export selected tracks. We'll say we want to copy our media files. We'll call this, we'll just put it on our desktop. All right, let's just put it on. Okay, so if we export our selected tracks, so now when we go to an empty project, we'll do a new project. And we import our selected track. So we'll import a track archive. And we'll import that. We'll select our particular track. And now we could see that, you know, we see our outputs, but if we actually save our selected track with the bus, so let's say if I come here, let's go ahead and we'll save audio 05. This is going out to our audio 07 bus. We'll save both of these together, and we'll export the selected tracks. Okay, and now when we go to import track archive, now the routing will be preserved. So I'll just do this on a new project so we could see. So import our track archive. All right, so now when we look at our audio track, we can see that this is still being routed. So the track presets are intended that they could immediately work in any project, not regarding the particular routing. But if we save a track, like if we export the selected tracks and import it as a track archive, we could retain the routing. So that way, if you have something great that you want to set up, you know, you import the track preset, it's immediately going to work in the project because the routing isn't designed to exclude it from working. So track presets will include the the panning, the volume, the plugins, inserts, channel strip, and whatever instrument settings. All right, so we see 5E checking in from Winnipeg. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Jorge checking in from Portugal. We have Soren in Sweden. Matty Rojas is asking how we're doing. So I'm doing great. We have Dwight Cunningham checking in from the Bahamas. So Dwight, I checked. I know you had a question in the last live stream about the I think it was UR242 with the DSP Mix Effects software. So it looks like I checked it out on the Apple App Store, and it looked like everything was free of charge. So make sure you look for the DSP Mix FX, but it looked like it was free. All right, we have Rudy Vissenberg checking in from the Netherlands. All right, so we have Watch Addicts 12 says question from Mark Meter in Little Rock, Arkansas. Greetings, guys. Having difficulties using Very Audio in 13 Pro. Do you have a best tutorial or best series of tutorials you recommend? So I think I did a pretty extensive tutorial, like when the features when Cubase 10 was released. But so you could look for that. Under like it might be like the Cubase 10 like launch video series, but we'll go over a couple of things here that may be able to kind of make things a little easier. So let's say if we have a Very Audio, so generally I like to do my Very Audio editing in a large window just so we have more space. When working with Very Audio, a couple of things to be aware of is there's smart controls. So there's a default set, and then there's a more powerful set where we can see all smart controls. So a lot of things don't happen until you actually hover over a particular note. So Very Audio will automatically do the segment detection. So if we want to move a note, we can just select the note right on top. We can move it. Previous versions of Very Audio, we would always have to kind of come over here to correct pitch. So if we wanted to, just simply take a particular area and correct the pitch, we would have to come over to the sliders, or if we wanted to straighten the curve to minimize vibrato. But now if we go to the bottom, we can just automatically come right here to bottom center, and we could choose to correct pitch. We could also select a series of notes and choose to automatically correct pitch like this just by grabbing the bottom center. If we want to adjust the top center, that would allow us to straighten the curve. So we're able just to do that. We could also come over, and if we wanted to tilt, let's say like perhaps we ran out of diaphragm support here and you wanted to adjust the tuning, like if it drifted flat at the very end of a note, we could also move this diamond and say we only want to do our tilts from that particular point. So we could kind of take our different segments here and choose, okay, I want this transition easier into different notes. I want to transition into this particular note, so we could tilt the pitch. And if you hold down I think it's the Alt or Option key, we could just kind of tilt the pitch both ways depending on its axis right there. If we want to go to the bottom right hand corner, we could adjust the volume and adjust the formants in the bottom left hand corner. So those are a couple of things that you could do with Very Audio, but if you want to send me an email, I could send you a link. I think the Very Audio 2 came out with Cubase 10, and I did kind of probably like a 10-minute complete walkthrough of all this stuff there. All right, we see Jan from Cubase Index giving kudos to Jazz Dude. for the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. Wonderful to see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo, California. All right, Matty Rojas asked, how do I route the output of a reference track directly to the monitor instead of the output track where I have processing? All right, so if you're using the control room, this is like a perfect application for the control room. Let me just find... see if it's in my, I don't think it's in my recent list, but let's open up a project here. And and the question often gets to be, how do you, if you have processing that's going on in your particular, in the master effects area, and now we want to actually not process the reference track that's already been mastered through that. So I'm going to come over here, and so first off is make sure that we're using the control room. So I'm going to go to my audio connections, go to the control room, make sure it's active. We want to have our monitor path. So we're going to add, right click to add a monitor to make sure our monitor is added. And I want to right click, and we're going to add a Q mix so that, let me clear my throat. So we're going to add like a headphone mix or Q mix. And I called this one already a reference. So I'm going to take this particular track, and let's open up, let's say, our track view. I'm going to send its output to no bus. And when we go to our Q sends, I'm going to send it to the reference level at 0 dB. So this track, which is my reference, is going through the control room. All the other tracks are going through the master output, and then the master output through the control room. So I'm going to do just a really kind of nasty EQ curve so we could differentiate it here. So let's say, so as we play back this, we don't hear anything currently, but when we go to our Q, so this is our reference track. And now when I want to go to my normal mix, we can just come right over here. These are all the other tracks that are going through the master fader. And now when I switch to my, and let's say in the master fader, just to make it, we're going to put on like a flanger, something really obviously ugly and inappropriate. So even though this reference track is in the mix, we don't hear it until we go to our Q mix. So we see we don't hear the flanger, just the EQ, just so we know that we're listening to a different signal path. Now the rest of the multi-tracks are playing through the mix, through the flanger. Let's turn that off out of respect for the song. So now we could listen to our reference, not going through our master effects processing, and then listen to our mix, which is going through the master channel processing, and you could just toggle back and forth between the two and have a reference that way. All right, we have VS Terranova checking in from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Thanks for joining us. All right. All right, and Matty Rojas just sending greetings from Chile. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Grant Floring who's sending greetings from Michigan, and Balsa is sending his greetings from Montenegro. We have George sending greetings from Germany. All right, Dwight Cunningham just asks, Greg, is there a way to reset the keys below the chord pads in regard to playing my controller using lone key to play a chord? All right, so if, let's say if we have, let's see if we have just... All right, so let's say we have a Rhodes here, and we want to reset the trigger notes of the chord pad. So I think if we just come over here to settings and we go to the player remote, that I think, let's say if we go to our pad remote keys, so we see our chord pad triggers. So if you want to adjust the chord pad trigger notes, you can choose the octave, and you can see it reflect here as I make my adjustments. So if you want it to be a different octave, you could just come right over here. So again, in the chord pads, once you have the chord pads in the lower zone, you'll see like the little MIDI settings, the chord pads remote settings right here. And then you're going to go to the pad remote control. So if you wanted starting at G0 instead of C1, you could just change the trigger keys directly there for your chords. So let me know if that's helpful for you, Dwight. All right, Sarufim asks, curious, is Iconica Sketch part of Cubase Pro 14? So yes, it is part of the Cubase 14 license, and you could always determine what is part of your license if you go to like your Steinberg download assistant here. So let's get this opened up here. Let's just reopen it here real quick. But yeah, it is part of your Cubase 14 license, and if you go into your Steinberg download assistant and you just select like the Cubase 14, that you'll see it as part of your Cubase 14 license. Okay, Richard Willis asks, I recently exported the Dorco 5 project into Cubase. I noticed the dynamics or expressions were missing when the MIDI played back. Is there any way to export the expressions or dynamics? So I don't think that's currently carried over because it's not actually writing the MIDI CC data. So it could depend on if you've written the MIDI CC data in as part of Iconica. I think we'll see more of that, more depth of that coming in the future. But if you needed those immediately to go over, you could just simply export it as a MIDI file, and I believe that will be translated. But currently I don't think the dynamics from a Dorco project immediately reflect in the same way in Cubase. It's intended to kind of get your music in and out so that you could do so that you could, start right there and kind of finish it in one of the programs is kind of the design intention. All right, so we see from George says, Greg, I understand from one of the live streams that the effect send is pre-panner. Is there a way to make it post-panner apart from using direct routing, which I understand is post-panner? All right, so let's say I want to come over and I have, let's say, going to add an effect send here. So let's go to the send. I want to just right click here. So let's say we're going to our reverb. All right, so And if we just simply look, right click on the panner itself, we can just simply at this point, so let's say just, you could switch between pre-fader and post-fader for the panners. So if you want to just simply right click, you can move it to post-fader, or right click, move it to pre-fader panner. And that could be on each individual pan. So if you want to, each individual effect, so let's say I have a drum room here, I could have this be, so I could just simply toggle these independently. So I want it to be pre-fader, or I want this one to be post-fader, or vice versa. So try just right-clicking, and then you could switch which ones are pre and post-fader. All right, so watch Addix12 says, when I first enter the Very Audio editor area, the vocal phrases are colorful. When I make a certain edit, the color goes away and I can find no way to bring back the color. All right, so at this point, if we want to come over here to, let's say, your Very Audio. So the design intention is that with Very Audio, you're going to have kind of like your smart tools for smart control. So you don't necessarily, so a lot of people, when they see the segments that are colored and they go, okay, I just want to draw something in, then you're kind of switching the tools for the sample editor to get the segments back to where they're colored and where you have kind of control. You just simply need to come right over here and just click on the Edit Very Audio again. And there is a keyboard shortcut that you could set up, but it's really kind of like the tools are always going to be here, so you don't have to switch tools because there's kind of smart hover based tools. So if for some reason you switch tools here, just come back and click right here on the Edit Very Audio, and then you could see all of the controls and hover. So give that a try. All right, so Radar, the band, just says, greetings from Dallas, Fort Worth. My team says hi to everyone from an undisclosed location in Italy. Woohoo. So good for him. Hope he's having a wonderful time in Italy. It's a great place to go for a trip. All right, wonderful to see Vinny from Sabatino Studios from Orlando, Florida. Thanks for joining us today. All right, Seraphim asks, last question. You can ask as many questions as you want. Does sending a reverb as a send rather than using it as an effects channel save CPU performance? I'm wondering as I need to save resources. So if we had, let's say, 10 projects, so all right, so let's say we have 10 audio tracks, 15 audio tracks, and we want these all to go to the same reverb. I can just come right over here now, and let's say I want to add an effects channel, and we'll make it a reverb. All right, so now when we come over to our effect sends, we could see that we've added a reverb to all these particular tracks. So when we do this, we create an effects channel, and the send could go to a group or to an effects channel. So right now we're using one reverb for all 15 tracks, and each of the tracks, when we go to our mix console, we can choose to adjust the amount of reverb that it's going to this reverb. We could set different amounts. So this way we're using one reverb. Where people run into a lot of CPU problems is if they take that same reverb and run it as an insert on all 15 tracks. That way you're using 15 reverbs as opposed to 1. So in that scenario, using sends, going to an effects track, could save CPU resources as opposed to putting the reverb as an insert on all the tracks. All right, so George is just saying, I was also wondering where Cubase saves the MIDI files of a project. I can't find it in the media pool or in the project window. So since the MIDI files, like the MIDI events themselves, they're just saved as part of the particular project. So when we come over here, all of the MIDI information isn't stored as a separate entity. It's just part of the Cubase project itself. Now, if you wanted to save them as separate entities, and if it's going to a particular, if we wanted this to always load up a particular instrument with these settings, we could choose to export, and it's going to a virtual instrument. We could just come over here and export a MIDI loop if we wanted to. So we could just say file export MIDI loop, but generally so we could do it here. So since we have just the actual event, so now we can see that we could export, a particular, and again, it has to be an instrument track. So let me just add a quick instrument track here. So let's say, and I have some data here. So my instrument track, if we export it as a MIDI loop itself, then, we can automatically save the particular settings, but within the project itself, the MIDI isn't kind of stored as separate entities like an audio file, where each audio file is a separate entity that fits within the Cubase project file. So the Cubase project file just automatically encompasses the particular MIDI events that are within the particular project. All right, Balsa asks, help needed. New range selection tool automatically cuts and moves the selection when using the key shortcut nudge left, nudge right, but for nudge up or nudge down shortcut, nothing happens. Okay. So let me just... All right, so let's say I'm here with my range tool, and we nudge the selected range. All right, so let's say all right, so and I'm just command option, so we could do that and nudge the events. And then we could move the events, like the range selection. So, I think what we're doing at this point is moving. So, if we want to resize, we could use, but we don't necessarily nudge up or down. So we're not dealing with the event, but with the selected range. So when we're in the range tool, we're moving the selected range up or down, and we're not taking the selected range. So you think of the range as having more of an impact horizontally as opposed to vertically. Is just the definition of the range for that particular track. So if I want to move the range, we're actually going to move the particular range horizontal, so I can move the position of the range. If I hold down Control Command, I could move and nudge the range. But, when we are moving vertically, it's just going to determine which track the range is affecting. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Balsa. All right, Cycling is Awesome asks, hi Greg, what is the best way to export stems in Cubase 14? The sidechained effects between tracks should be exported, transferred to. So yeah, they're kind of automatically transferred over. All right. So I'll just show you. So let's say if we want to export stems, I'll come over. Let me just open up a quick project here. Okay, so here I have, let's say I'll set up just a quick range. So I'm going to set my left and right locators, and let's say I want to create a side chain here. So I want this kick to automatically side chain the compressor on this particular channel. So let's go to compressor. I will set its side chain source from the kick. Okay, so now as we come here, so now if I wanted to take these two tracks and export them, all right, so I could just come right over here. Let's go to your file, and we'll do our export audio mix down, and we would choose multiple. So I'm going to come over and say in our, all right, we're going to do these two tracks. I set my left and right locators. We have the side chain automatically going in, and I'm going to export these two tracks. We could do it with effects, but I'm going to now create audio tracks. So we'll say export audio. And we could see that now we have our stems that are created. So when we listen to it, so I did a different sample rate. So our kick, and now our side chain is automatically taken into account when we do the export audio mixdown. So when you're in a project, you could choose, go to export audio file, or I'm sorry, export audio mixdown. You want to select multiple, you could select all the tracks that you want. So if you want to say, okay, I want all my effect channels, I want my instruments, I want my audio channels, and now it'll go between the left and right locators. You could choose different levels of effects, whether it's just going to be inserts and sends, or inserts, channel strip, volume pan, adding sends, adding the master effects, and then that side chain is automatically included in the export audio mixdown. All right, Blackout Rolla asks, when I play audio tracks, audio dropouts occur. What could be the problem? I have SSD. So, usually it could be indicative that you're going to have a couple of things. So if you have, tracks that are playing, if you have plugins, so first thing would be to make sure that when you go and select your particular audio interface, that you raise the buffers. So if you go to your studio menu to studio setup, we select your audio interface under audio system, click on a control panel. There's one or two audio interfaces that don't open up the control panel that you might have to open up its little control app, but for the most part, it'll open up the control panel. You could try to increase your buffer size. So try raising the buffer, see if that helps. If that still doesn't help, if you're on PC, one of the tricks that you could do before doing that, but it could also be that the plugins, like you have too many plugins going on. So it could also be that raising the buffer size makes it easier for the computer to do more processing. So, if you have a lot of plugins, those plugins may be causing CPU, that could be causing audio performance issues. Sometimes if you have one track that has 16 plugins, that one audio track can only talk to, because it's going to be in serial, that one audio track can only talk to one processing core. So if you have, like 4 tracks of audio, one track has 16 plugins, it's not going to be able to take those 16 plugins and spread them across CPU processing cores, just how computer processing works. So that could be an issue of plugins. And if you still run into issues, if you're on Windows, check out a utility called LatencyMon, LatencyMon, LatencyMon. And it could be something that's interrupting the audio performance from being optimized. And that's a little utility that could point out, could be a network driver, a video display driver, if you have an NVIDIA card, stuff like that. And that could help point out problems that could be causing the clicks and pops and leading to a non-optimized audio performance system for your computer. It's not as, it's not as relevant for the Mac OS platform, but for Windows platform, it could actually make a difference in pointing out. All right, Rudy Vissenberg asks, I created an expression map and all the names of each expression disappeared. At the left, it still works. I have to memorize which expression is on which line. Okay. So let's see if I could maybe recreate. So let's say I'll add an instrument track. I'll just make it a Hallian Sonic. All right, so let's say I want to come over to my expression map setup. All right, so say I just calling it slot 1 through 5. So make sure that we save the expression map. So I'll come over here, call it May 6, 2025. All right, so now when we come here, we could just see, we'll just get to our editor, to our expression map. We'll say our May 6, 2025, and we can see all the names appear here. So I haven't really come across that happening to me or heard about it in all the live streams. But if you want to email me your expression map to clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to take a look at it. All right, so we see Best Green Jesus says, checking to say thank you. That MIDI automation to Lane's tip did the trick for me. So it's great. Glad it worked. Great to see you on. We see Best Green Jesus from San Diego. All right. All right, so we have Vincent checking in. He says likely won't be able to be here for the whole stream. All right, Vincent's asking to Greg and everyone, has anyone noticed Cubase 14 crashing when creating new workspaces? Happens frequently in 14, not at all in 12. So I haven't I haven't run into that. Let me see if I come over here. I'll just add a couple workspaces. Let's say global. And let's just open up. And I'll save some project workspaces. All right. So I'll just try. So I just added 4 workspaces. We'll see if. So it didn't run into any problems, but if anyone else is running into problems, feel free to chime in. All right, so we have Nikki Duncan saying hello to everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have Pete Will joining from Australia in the middle of the night. Wonderful to see Terry Gray checking in from Minneapolis in Minnesota, United States. All right, so we see Luisito asked, the latest Cubase update included a feature which is the ability to color notes in red when notes are outside an instrument/vocal range in the score view. Can I create a custom range of this feature? All right, so let me just take a look. Just looking for. All right. Just looking for a quick score. I'll just. Just see if I can find a quick project in. I'll just see if I can add a quick. Sorry about that. I'll look for his projects after. All right, so let's get to, it's maybe going to be under instrument settings. I'm just seeing if so it might be here in interpretation. So maybe under the instrument settings. So let's see if we all right, so, but I think it might be, I would take a look and I could do some more research on this just to make sure. But if we go to the settings and we go to maybe the instrument settings, that under interpretation, that you could maybe see right here, it may be based directly upon the filter pitches above and below settings right there. But I could do some more research on that just to make sure. But I think that's where you may see it in the instrument settings. Sorry about that. All right, Sarfim asks, there's a problem with the script of the Akai MPK261 MIDI controller. The sustain pedal keeps on being used automatically as a mute, CC64. Is there any way to fix this? It may be an Akai issue. So probably what's going on is if you come over to your studio menu to studio setup, go to your MIDI port setup, and for the control, make sure that for the control port of the Akai that it's not set to in all MIDI inputs. So uncheck this from the control. There's probably a control, so try unchecking that. Or if it's set up, it could also be set up where you have this as a Mackie control. So if you have a Mackie control set up for the Akai, you know, so it's probably I think it's the Mackie control protocol. If this is routed to your Akai for Mackie control, that the Mackie control will have the sustain pedal do the behavior that you describe. So make sure that if you have it set up as Mackie control, try setting it to not connected for input and output and see if that makes a difference for you. All right, we have Kerwin Young just wrapped up a recording session in time to catch up with the live stream. Wonderful to have you on. Kerwin's based in Atlanta. All right, Chris Higginson says, hi Greg, I want to get a new M4 Mac Mini. Is the M4 chip sufficient or I need to go for the M4 Pro chip? I think either one would be great. Get as much RAM as you can. I know sometimes it's expensive in the Apple realm. But yeah, either like I'm running on an M4 chip. I just recently upgraded from an M1 Pro, and that served me well for years. I think you're fine with either processing chip. All right. Vinny asks, Greg, thanks for sharing your Cubase brain with all of us. Why does the Halion Sonic 7 not allow me to resize it vertically? Horizontal works fine. So when we're doing that, so say we have our Halion Sonic. So this is kind of fixed. We could go horizontal just to kind of for the library functions, but the actual program itself is kind of a fixed size so that people know exactly, because since there's hundreds of companies that make instruments for Halion, not all of them may be resizable, so we could resize all of your different content libraries, but the actual instrument is kind of a fixed size. Halion can adjust each part vertically and horizontally, but when it's just kind of a playback engine, Halion Sonic is designed just to stretch out for the preset management, and that's why it goes horizontal and not vertical. All right, Vince asks, says, I have a question for you, Greg. I have my MIDI remote mapping done, but I have no way of setting the save button to save as. All right, so let's take a look. See if I go to my MIDI map, my MIDI remote here. I'll just do it with my nano control. And so let's see if I could set this. So one is to make sure that the button that you're actually trying to do, if it's a button on your controller, that it's set. So let's see if I could program this for save as. So I'll just come over here to key commands. I think it's going to be under file menu and save as. So when I come over here, I'll apply the mapping for this particular key. So now it's asking me to save the project and do a save as command. So make sure that the button that you're actually hitting, if it's make sure that button, like you'll see this like send a MIDI message. But make sure that the button that you're pressing is actually capable of transmitting MIDI data. So if it transmits MIDI data, it looks like it could be programmed in the MIDI remote for save as. Just go to your key commands, file menu, and scroll down to save as is one of the available options. But if that button that you're trying to map doesn't actually transmit MIDI, then it won't work. Okay, just reading through comments here. My chat field jumped. All right, so we see Tony Trunzo checking in from Australia, about an hour outside of Sydney. He says, hi, Greg and all. Cubase Nation, a big thanks to all for such a great bunch of professional guys and girls for the help in learning Cubase. Much appreciated. Thanks again to all. So thanks for joining us. Sabatino Studios just telling Chris Higginson he has a Mac Mini Pro M4. Says you will not be sorry. Extreme crunching power. All right, we have John Costigan checking in from Kenosha. We have That OJ Sharer says this is the best DAW. All right, so we have Salam YouTube says, hi dear, could you show me the videos, light, and videos color, how to use, please? Right, so I think it's going to be set up here. So we go to the studio setup, and we go to the video player. So like the video fills color space. So I think that you could just make the adjustments there. So try that. All right, John Raham asks, is there a way to add notes in the tempo track in the project window that snap to the grid? And our whole number BPM seems not to adhere to snap settings. All right, so a lot of times if we want, let's say if we come here, let's add a tempo track. Okay, I'll just kind of draw in. Here, I'll just create a new project here. Or I think I could actually just... Okay, so let's say we have our tempo track laid out for us here. Okay. So you want to add notes in the tempo track in the project window that snap to the grid. All right. So the tempo track doesn't have any particular notes or MIDI note values. So let's say if I come here and I just, now I'll move, like, let's say this Rhodes part here, and we have our tempo track. So we have our tempo set here. So we look, kind of, we'll say, okay, this is our bars and beats. So I'll just randomly draw some notes in. So just like I want to say, okay, I want to snap my MIDI notes here to quarter notes. So we can see that we have different tempo values here. So I'm just going to say snap. So we hit the letter J to turn snap on or off. And now as I do this, that note will snap directly to the quarter note. So as I could do that, the notes are now snapping directly to the quarter note. So if I have this off, it's freely placed anywhere. And as soon as this snap is turned on, and again, by hitting the letter J, now I could only snap it to a quarter note. If my snap value is set to eighth note, I can only snap to eighth notes. Or if it's set to half notes, now we could only snap notes to the half notes. So that seems to be working as expected, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding the question. All right, so we see Dwight Cunningham just says, Greg, thanks very much. And we see Yash decides and you're getting 32 gigabyte RAM with 2 terabyte SSD, probably the Mac M4. All right, Nikki Duncan says, hey, Greg, is there a way to import a drum map into Cubase? It says, thanks for the live streams. So certain instruments will automatically do that. So if we have like a groove agent instrument, we could automatically come right over here and say, so let's say if I come over here, I'll just add a brand new one. So we'll say, okay, let's add a groove agent kit. So when we come over to, let's say, Groove Agent SE, so it's not all instruments will allow you to do this. So if I just right click, we'll come over here, let's load up just a quick, say Simon Phillips Jazz Drums. I do this. So now we could just say create drum map from instrument. And now when we go to open up the editor, the drum map is automatically created. So I don't think that's going to work with third-party tools, but with Groove Agent SE, you could automatically extract the drum names from the instrument itself. Thanks for joining us, Nikki. That's my wife's name. All right, Tim Weinheimer asks, it says, can you quantize settings to drop markers on a marker track at the note position on quantize settings? So I think when you drop notes in, so let's say if I'm in the middle here and I drop a marker, so let's say we'll come right over here. So if I drop markers in between, so let's say just a little bit off here. All right, so let's say if I spread these out just a little bit. All right, but now I think if I come over here, let's say my quantized value is set to quarter note. And let's see if we could quantize. Sometimes you can. So it looks like the markers will kind of stay, but let's see if we could have it snap to the value, because I think the markers are intended to be kind of right at that particular time. You could always just kind of come over here and say I want this at 175, and you could just simply type in the position from directly from the info line. But let's see if we can get it if we have our snap turned on. But I think the markers are, designed to be kind of absolute in time. So they may not be designed to snap. Looks like that one kind of snapped. Let's say if I set this to quarter note, and you could always just kind of, if your cursor is there, let's see if we could do the move object, move events to front. No, so I think the markers are kind of like where you place them is kind of often where it is, but if you need it to be more precise, try just coming over here and type in, okay, I want to set 174. I want that marker at 172, and then you could move the position directly where you are from the info line. All right, George says, tricky. I'm looking for post fader, but I was understanding that the post fader is pre-panner. So I got that wrong, correct? Yeah, so I don't think it's pre-panner, but let's go ahead and just take a look. All right. All right, so say now. So I'm going to add an effects channel to this. All right, and let me just adjust the send amount. All right, so right now when I adjust the track, we don't hear the reverb. So I right click and we move it to pre-fader. And the reverb stays the same regardless of the fader position. And if I move my panning, we still hear reverb in the left channel, even though it's right. So the track is panned, and I'll switch this back to pre-fader to post-fader. So it doesn't seem to have an effect. So the reverb will. Now, if we wanted to pan the reverb, send. Like if I go to, let's say my channels here, and I go to my channel view, we click on send and then adjust our panning. So this way I only hear the reverb in one side, but it seems pre or post fader doesn't affect the panning. All right, SE Tracks asks, hey Greg, can you show me how to make a template? I don't want to make new channels, just a template. If I open Cubase, it load my template and I could start recording. All right, so let's say I want to do a template that consists of Groove Agent. I want to add, let's say, a piano. So I'll just remove this track. All right. So let's say I want to add an instrument track. Let's add a piano. So we'll come over to the grand. And I want this to play the... And I want, let's say, an electric bass. So we'll come, let's just add. All right, so let's say I want clean jazz bass. All right, so. All right, and now I want to add, let's say, 6 audio tracks. All right, and we could say, okay, this will be guitar. You can hit the tab key, vocal 1, background. And let's say I want percussion and acoustic guitar. I want these to be able to access an effects track. So I will add, let's say, 2 effects. I'm going to add a reverb. And let's add a delay. And let's say this is now what I need for my particular template. So to save a template, we would come over to your file menu. We would say save as template. We're going to call this May 6th, 2025. All right, so now when I go to a new project, we would just see under the more, we would see our May 6, 2025. And now we could pick a folder where we want to record into and activate the project, and we are good for recording. So once you have everything set up, go to your file menu, save as template. To open up that template, go to new project, look under more, and then you could just simply select your particular template, hit record, and get started. All right, Richard Willis asks, how do I edit/set key from the chord track when using the scales functionality? I clicked on the lane below the chord track, but nothing happens. I can add chords, but it keeps changing the key. Okay, so to do that, so say if I come over, okay, so when we see this, I have a chord track, and let's go ahead and I'm going to show, I could click right here and I could see the key. Now when we come over here, and we see that, okay, if I wanted to change, like I can't necessarily change the particular voicing, like the particular scale here. So I think we need to, thought it was, if we come over here, let's say, okay, we see right here in the inspector for the chord track, disable automatic scales. And then you could double click and say, okay, I want this to be a D blues scale or D Arabian scale. So you could switch the particular scales right here. So try just to uncheck the automatic scales. And if you don't see the scales, click on this icon here that will show the scales. Once that is unchecked, we could double click and you could see and edit and modify the scales that you want. But if it's set to automatic, then you won't be able to make any modifications. Uno Momento wants people to whack the like button. I was just thinking with Michael Teams being in Italy, maybe he's going to have some new gelato flavors for us when he comes back. All right, Bratman Studio wants people to hit the like button, gives the YouTube algorithm a boost of happiness. That's always good. All right, so we see says Jet Trees just says a Cubase license cost. So you could always check. I'm not sure what country you live in. But if you go to like your local Steinberg dealer, if you're in a country, or if you go to steinberg.net, and this will be, I'm based in the US, so this will be kind of United States pricing. So let's say if we come over and we say, okay, we want to go to Cubase, we will buy Cubase 14. So whether you want it to be Pro, Artist, or Elements, then you could just come over and you could see the actual price right there for your country and your local market where you live. So you can buy directly from the Steinberg online shop or from a local dealer, either way. All right, Studio International says, is there a way to link and save different interfaces in their settings to particular projects? At present, I have to change it manually if I use the Montage MX8 interface or a Genos 2 from my UR824. So, for inputs and outputs, what you could do is just simply come over here and go to your audio connections, and you'll see your inputs and outputs. And for each of those, you could save different presets. So each of those, you can save different presets right there. So you can say one for your UR824 or if you're using the Genos or the montage, and save those particular settings there. All right, so we have Michael Marshall checking in from Somerset, UK. We have Hoy Boy sending greetings from LA. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see Tam Ryan asks, is there a way to mouse swipe over, activate solos or mutes on a series of tracks? Other DAWs have this function, but I've never found an easy way to do it in Cubase. So while, if you wanted to just come over here and, so it may not work kind of like other programs, but if I select like all these tracks and just hit S, so maybe it's not swiping, but, just selecting the particular tracks you want and then hit S or M for mute or record enable. So all of those key commands, so it's not really swiping, but, just saying, okay, I want all those tracks, solo, etc., and the functionality will work across the selected tracks. All right, so we see from Hoy Boy says, is there a way to have the cursor not immediately jump back to the starting position on stop? However, I wanted to jump back to the starting position when I hit play again. So essentially return to start on start and not on stop. All this in one key command. So I don't think so, but so let's say if I'm here and we go to our transport and we go to our start mode and we say return to start position on stop. So that's what it's going to do is as soon as you stop, I could, so it's not going to pause. So it's going to immediately just return to the start position on stop. In that way, I think it's also like if it needs to, get a particular sample ready, that gives it more time to, like if you have, if a sample has to be loaded into your computer's memory, like let's say you're using like a huge Hallian kit, you could just simply have all those samples ready to go. So to return to start position, it's not going to do it on playback, but on stop, as the name implies. But I'll pass it along as a feature request. All right, so we have the artist known as Love says, hello, hope everyone's doing great. Thank you, Greg. I hit the like buttons. That's great. All right, we have Razel, wonderful seeing Zamini from Denmark joining us. Very loyal attendee over the years. All right, so we have Yao Amen just saying hello. All right, so question says, doing edit very audio on tracks for the first time in a project or a bounced one has a default zoom setting. Is there a way to save the new default zoom setting? I find myself always having to zoom in every time I do very audio on a new track. All right, so let's take a look. So let's say if I'm here. So yeah, I think it tries to, let me just drop some audio in that Very Audio hasn't analyzed yet. All right, I'll just revert this. All right. So let's say, all right, doing Very Audio for a first-time project or a bounce one has a default zoom setting. Is there a way to save the new default zoom setting? I find myself always having to zoom in every time we do Very Audio. All right, so let's say we want to find the bass. All right, so I'm going to come over here. Let's do, let's say, our Very Audio analysis of it. All right, so let's say we're playing along here. All right, let's get to this track and do Very Audio settings. Okay, so let's go back to our bass part. So I think it kind of, you know, seems like it's, let's zoom this out more, where we're seeing roughly 3 measures of data, and we go back. And let's say I want this zoom. So it seems like maybe the sample editor is kind of set to maybe the same zoom factor. It's not necessarily synchronized, but it looks like it's kind of universally set. So I don't know if there's a way to do it or if it's just kind of saving. So let's say if we look at this and we're seeing, let's say, 97 bars, and it may be also based on the length of the event. So let's come over here. So we can see that the setting, the context setting will be identical, but as we go between different Very Audio edit pages. So if I come here where we're seeing, let's say, roughly 7 measures, and I go back up to the bass part, and we're going to see kind of the same time scale to be consistent throughout these settings. But so I think as you adjust the zoom factor, that it will be consistent between different tracks. All right, so we have Lawrence from Barn Door Recording in Rhode Island. Says, Greg, you may have answered this on the previous stream, but VST Connect Pro, how do I update it to the new licensing? Don't have a voucher in my Steinberg. So make sure that you're running the latest version. I think it's 5.5. If you still don't have a license, reach out to Steinberg support, and they could get and they could probably push the voucher into your account for you. But if you have like a previous version, it may not be on the Steinberg licensing. All right, so Vincent just asking, what do you think I should do about Cubase 14 crashing when using workspaces? I've not done anything new. Then installing 14 on 12 works fine. Should that not imply it's a Cubase error? So I would try running your Cubase. So if you're running on Mac OS, hold down Command Option Shift right after you start and see if you get the same behavior. If the preferences are disabled, and if you're on Windows, hold down Alt Control Shift and see, because Cubase will take the preferences from Cubase 12 so that all of your settings will be migrated over. And so see if you start with fresh preferences, if that makes a difference for you. All right, so we see Isaac just says take your time, but hurry up. Okay, try. All right, so Richard Willis just says, hey Greg, notice your SX2 ISO image. That was the first Cubase I used. So congratulations, been on it for 10 versions. It's great. We see Yash Desai says, I have to choose between an M1 Pro MacBook Pro and the 10 centimeter M4 Mac Mini. Which one do you recommend? Experience the Apple Silicon. Other people could chime in as well. So I think you're always going to be best getting the latest processors. Just gives you longer lifespan on your systems. So if you're buying kind of a 4-year-old machine, like a 3-year-old machine, there's always a chance that Apple could not make a particular operating system compatible with older processors much sooner than later processors. All right, Rob Schmedicke says, Greg, Rob from Tarpon Springs, could you show how to drill down on a vocal track to split the words the singer sung to fix their timing? Can a word they sung be deleted by using VariAudio? So generally VariAudio, if we delete, so let's say we're not deleting kind of the underlying material. So let's say if I come here and we select a particular segment, let me just say we'll come here to this note and I'll delete this note. So we're kind of deleting the segmentation analysis. So when we listen to it, I think we'll still hear the notes. So it's just kind of our reference point. So we don't delete within VariAudio. One of the things that you can do is to come over here and say, okay, like this note, let's say I want to take this note, and if I go and I have my smart controls set to show all smart controls, I could take the volume and lower it on particular notes. So let's say I want to take these notes here, so this is not deleting the note, but just kind of lowering the volume of the note. So if we come back, so we could lower the volume significantly. But if you wanted to do vocal edits where the vocalist is off a little bit, I would do that using kind of what we'd call free warping. We could do it in the sample editor or on the project window. So let's say we are coming over here. I'm going to take this.
Oh, I remember the day that we went. Seems like a long, long time ago.
All right, so let's say maybe the last little phrase. So if we come over, one of the great things, as we work in Cubase, it's automatically going to do our hit points. And we could turn these hit points. So if we go into our sample editor and we see our hit points on a particular file, we can see kind of where all of our kind of natural hit points fall here. And we could adjust these. So we can say, okay, I want to adjust my threshold. I want to adjust my intensity of particular notes. So we'll adjust our threshold down just a little bit. And what we could do is you'll see this little create tab. Come over here and just say create warp markers. Now, once we come over, we could switch our tool here. We could do it in what we call free warp. So I would just grab the warp tool here, switch to free warp. And then as you zoom in, you'll see these little free warp markers. You can add your own free warp marker. So if this phrase was a little late, you can now move this particular phrase. And if you do it from the hit points, if we didn't have like a marker afterwards, it would kind of shift all of the notes. So if you're at the point where like, oh, this one word was bad, try putting a marker before and a marker after, and then you just kind of move. You'll see the yellow vertical line as we get close to it. We see it turn white. Once it turns white, then we could just freely move that note, and we could just have it automatically fall on the grid. So if I want this note here to fall right on measure 122, I could just do that. And if snap is turned on, we could just snap the attack of that note. And, and for where the next note starts, that will remain intact. So try again with the hit points. And in the sample editor, you're going to have those. You can maybe tweak the hit points, have it create warp markers, switch to your free warp tool. And again, if you don't see the warp markers, then you can just come over and kind of zoom, and then you could just move those markers freely to adjust the timing and correct timing inconsistencies. Great to see you on, Rob. Just reading an article about Tarpon Springs, Florida. Thought of you. You see Yash also just is kind of in the dilemma. Let me clear my throat. In the dilemma of knowing which Mac to get. I think Mark Wary, who does a lot of work with Hans Zimmer and is kind of a longtime writer for Sound on Sound magazine. One of the smartest guys in our industry, super smart guy, a lot of fun to hang out with. He wrote a great article for Sound on Sound about kind of like the new M3 and M4 processors. So that would be a great reference to read if you haven't done that. Mark is super smart and totally gets it. So, all right, wonderful to see Benny from Sweden joining us. All right, Benny's question is, I help a friend install everything from the download manager. It does not want to install, but a message comes up that the sound card needs to be updated. He has done it, but it still doesn't help Cubase 14 Pro. So, if he's having problems with the download manager, getting that to work, if you just go to like a web browser and just say Cubase 14 installation download, and you can just go to your Cubase 14 downloads right here, and you could choose all of the contents for the download directly right here from the web browser. So I'm not sure what the audio interface with sound card is, and if you're running Mac or PC, or if your friend is running Mac or PC, that can make a difference. All right. So in Chatfield jump, let me find my spot. Okay. All right. Amari Montalvo asks, is it possible to zoom in and out, dragging with the mouse on the editor window? So if you start from the time, like the time at the top, you can just hold the left mouse button down and zoom in with the editors or the project window like so. So just kind of grab the time. And also if you use, if you just hold down the control or command key, you could zoom horizontally. If you hold down, so if you want to navigate here, so just the control key, you could zoom in using your mouse scroll wheel as well. All right, Mati Rojas asks, can I quickly move automation without having to cut and paste? So let's come over here. Let's just grab some automation on a particular track. So let's say, all right, so if I have that, you could just hold down, let's say, your Alt key. So I'm going to just come over here and hold down my Alt or Option key so we could kind of select the range of the automation. When you see it turn into a hand, hold down the Alt or Option key, and then you could quickly paste the automation wherever you want. So without holding down the Alt or Option key, with holding down the Alt or Option key, you could just kind of come right there and copy your parts around without using traditional cut, copy, paste. All right, wonderful to see Val from Vienna joining us. He's sending greetings from a rainy day. It's great to see you on the live stream. All right, so we see question for when I return later. Greg, thanks for your help. How can I delete a MIDI remote mapping page? Okay, so let's come over here to my MIDI remote. Let's go to the mapping page here. So let's say I want to make a new one. We'll call this FlyV. Okay, so we come here. Let me just try one more time. All right, so I think all you'd have to do is select it here, and then you'll see just in the settings cogwheel, then you could just choose to delete the mapping page. So again, just select, make it the active mapping page here. So let's say if we pop over, so we'll open up the mapping page, click right here. You could also access it from right here, select your mapping page, and on the settings, just click delete. All right. All right, wonderful to see Tiago joining us from Brazil. All right, so we see PR says, what about poor multi-core CPU performance on Cubase Pro 14? I have to use Audio Gridder to improve that. I don't get why a company like Steinberg cannot do like them, have a top last generation PC beast. So I think that so a lot of times when I get questions like this, people don't necessarily understand how the serial, how the CPU performance works. So, and I think pretty much all DAWs will kind of work the same way. So like if you have one track and you have 15 inserts, since that is a serial process, all of those inserts would be running on one processing core. So you could have 32 cores, and if one is being totally killed, at that point you have to, it looks like your CPU is like not performing, you don't have good CPU performance, but that's just the nature of how the signals are being processed. So if you could give some insights on, and you get the same thing if you have one virtual instrument that has 15, if you load up like a Howlian Sonic and you have 15 instruments, that one instrument is going to take up that one instrument with its 15, that one instance of Howlian Sonic with 15 instruments is only utilizing one CPU core. So if you send it out to another device that could use a different CPU core, if you're, sending it to perhaps a different utility. So it really makes a difference of, how your project is set up, and realize that how CPUs perform, and it's the same for all DAWs. So, but if you have like something more specific, and share like how many plugins are on a particular track, how many instruments, but Cubase does have really good multi-core performance, and you can see that in lots of shootouts on YouTube. All right, we have Nay Valley, Dr. S. Radhakrishna just says, hello, Greg. Radha from India. I get pop crackle noise from audio when imported into Cubase 14 Pro Windows UR44C. Try to change sample rates. The noise still remains. Suggestions to get rid of. So, the first thing is, one, make sure that you go to your studio setup and select the audio interface. The first thing to always do is to try to raise the buffer and see if that makes a difference. So if you're running a super low buffer, that can mean that your computer is working really hard. If you are running it off of like a USB flash drive, that could make a difference and cause, transferring all the data from a USB drive. It could also be, particular plugins that are causing high performance. It could be like as you play back audio, if it's kind of crackling. It could be a function that's like a hardware device that's interrupting the audio performance. And a tool like Latency Mon, as I mentioned before, could often be an easy way to kind of diagnose which particular component it could be causing the crackles and pops in your audio playback. All right, Roby asks, hello, Greg, could you talk more about the Shimmer plugin? Yeah, so Shimmer Reverb's kind of a nice effect in that it actually kind of will take the reverb and kind of knock it usually up an octave. And this is a new plugin that was kind of added in Cubase 14. We get feature requests for it on live streams. So it's nice to be able to have that communication from customers directly to Steinberg and have them implement the functionality. So let's say I want to take my guitar here. All right, I'm going to make this a stereo track, and I'm just going to put the Shimmer reverb here as an insert. So usually like reverbs would. So what this is going to do is take the kind of the reverb and knock it up like an octave. And you can pick kind of the frequency range, so if you want more just the high frequencies. Or if you want all frequencies. So you could limit the frequency range. So you want something a little more subtle, where it almost sounds like a synth pad that's kind of layering with the guitar. If you want to put some chorusing on. So a really wonderful addition to the reverb plugins that are included with Cubase. All right, so we see Daniel Coppins asks, Greg, is there a way to not add a new track? All of my templates send effects tracks. When I create a new track, it pre-populates all of my effects template tracks. I would like to not have any pre-pop. Okay, so is there a way to not add a new track? All my templates send effects tracks. This is when I create a new track, it pre-populates all of my effects templates. I would like to not have, so I'm not sure if it's when you're, so let's say if we, so I'm not sure if I fully understand, but let's say we have 4 tracks, here are a few audio tracks. All right, so, and we go to, let's say my sends, I don't have any sends here, I'll just hide my inputs. So I don't see any sense. If I add an effects channel by itself, so let's add an effects track. So I want the studio delay. All right, so this isn't populated, and I could go to my sends for each of the tracks and come over here and just say, okay, I want to take my particular audio tracks and send it directly to the studio delay. Now if I select all of these tracks and I add an effects track to the selected and say let's make this our reverb, now that will automatically populate the sends. So if you select to add it, it's automatically going to populate this. I'm not sure if this is what you mean by pre-pop, but if you just add an effects channel without selecting the tracks, then it will automatically be there in the template. But if you select the tracks and right click, then it's automatically going to be routed to the selected tracks. But Daniel, let me know if I'm misunderstanding the questions, or if that makes sense. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on from Bay Area, California. She is like number 65, 40 minutes ago. I'm going to try my best to catch up. All right, so you see John Costigan just says, thanks, Greg, for showing a quick, clean template set up and stored. Neat. All right. And we have, I believe, someone from Thailand. Sorry, I can't read language. Catch you live. It's 3:20 in the morning. So I'm just going to go back to sleep after the live stream. All right. Thanks for joining us. All right, we have Tam Ryan. Just says, cheers, Greg, for the info and greetings from Southampton, UK. See more discussion about the audio gritter. So make sure that you're not basically sending the plugin processing to a different track, and then that takes up, that frees up your system resources as well. So that's from PR. Wonderful to see Gerald Ely checking in from Martinez, California. All right, Blue Snake says, hi, Greg. Oh, my God, it loads projects so fast. Could I know what PC specs you use? So I'm just using, it's a fairly recent, I think I got it maybe around Christmas time or NAMM or like January. NAMM time doesn't make sense for most people. All right, but if I go to, it's an M4 with 64 gigs of RAM. So this is my system. So I have the Apple M4 Max, 64 gigs of RAM. So, and that's in 2 terabyte drive. So that's what I'm using for live streams, because my company was kind enough to lease it for me for my work use. Okay, so you see from Vincent, just clarification, sorry for misunderstanding. It says when activating VariAudio, zooming, doing some work, closing, then activating VariAudio on a new track, it's back to its default. All right, so let me just go back to the project we're on. All right, so let's say I go to my VariAudio here. I zoom. So let's see, we're going to see roughly 18 bars. So I change my zoom there. I go to, let's say, the saxophone part here. I have the same zoom settings. So if I zoom, let's say, my saxophone part, we have the same zoom settings here. So let's say I zoom in here. So we're going to say measures, I want to see measure 10. Basically from here to there, I go back to the bass, and I see the same zoom settings consistent there. So whatever zoom settings I have, it's the same zoom settings when I go back to different VariAudio. So it's not back to its default. So let me know if mine is working differently than yours. All right, so my Chatfield jumped on me. Let me find my spot where it was. All right, Sable Winters just says, thanks, Greg. I just learned something about hit points and markers and free warp. That's great. Hope it makes a little more sense. All right, so we see Benny just saying from the previous question that his friend is using Windows 11, Steinberg UR22C. So I don't think there's any like major updates to the UR22C. Last January 2024, there was a version 3, but you could still use the older ones. But if you're still having problems installing it, let me know if installing from the web browser is helpful. Wonderful to see Peter from Montreal. All right, and we have Gareth checking in from Bilbao, Spain. Thanks for making it. Gareth, I think I was lame and didn't get the download in time. So if you're able to send the download link again for, I think it was side 2 of the Hot Mess songs. Sorry, it's been busy couple weeks here. So Feb9 says, is it possible to use the zoom functions using 2-finger pinch gestures on a trackpad for Mac? So I think that there's a little like third-party free utility that allows you to work that way, but I don't think it's natively supported. But I think that there is a little utility that would allow you to do it. Okay, Richard Willis says, how do I go from pizzicato violin to arco with bow on the same track using expression map? Okay, I'll do it kind of with the cello, so you'll get kind of the same, but it'll be the same exact principle, but I have file set up for that. Okay, so if you're running it inside of Halligan Sonic, all you would have to do is you could double click and go to your expression map and just choose import key switches. Now that we've imported the key switches, we double click. We want to, instead of seeing velocity, we're going to just come over here and look at our articulations and dynamics. I'll make this a little larger. All right, so now we can see all of the articulations. Let's say we're going to start off with staccato. We'll say we'll start here with staccato. Okay, so we'll hit play. And I want these notes to switch to hits coming up here. So I could just come here. So we'll catch it here. Gonna do legato. So you can do all the annoying things that I was playing a Dvorak cello concerto this week and in orchestra, and then we had to switch back and forth every beat between pits and arco. So you can do annoying stuff like that. But once you have the expression map, so in the editor, just say import key switches. You want to switch the velocity lane to articulations and dynamics, and all the key switches should automatically show up. And you can just kind of enter in the data to switch between your different articulations. All right, Ben Tyreman just says, I noticed that Fire and Ice extension takes up a huge amount of CPU and my computer couldn't cope with it in Halion. So yeah, some of the instruments can be, even though it may have like a simple interface, may do a lot of stuff under the hood. So let me see if I have it in my Halion here. So I may not have that particular library, the materials, Fire and Ice. I think it's... Yeah, I don't have that, but yeah, sometimes some of the instruments can be taking, a tremendous amount of synthesis and processing capabilities. But I could see if I could get it installed for Friday's live stream. All right, Herchie Beats asks, in Key Editor, if I input a note almost last a minute, it won't sound on the first time, unlike other DAWs in Cubase. Why is that? Same settings in all DAWs, set MIDI latency low. All right. Okay, so I'll just... All right, let me just come over here. All right, so let's say I have a note here in my key editor, so I'm just going to create an event. Make sure I understand. Says if I input a note almost last minute, it won't sound on the first time. So I'm not sure if the note is lasting a minute, but let's say if I just come here. So I feel the weight. All right, so it says if I input note almost last minute, it won't sound on the first time, unlike other DAWs, only in Cubase. Why is that? I have same settings all DAWs, even set low, even set MIDI latency, MIDI low. All right, so here I'll just take the volume down, just. So if I input a note almost last minute, it won't sound on the first time. So we'll go, so that automatically played. So I'm not sure if the note is, like maybe you recorded the note, and let's say if the note is, was recorded prior, let's say if we move this whole event over, and if you recorded the note before, slightly before, and let's say if we come here and play, but if that's the case, maybe the note was recorded before, but if we go to your settings, and I think we go to editing MIDI, there should be like a chase MIDI event. Let me just, but you can see that it automatically chased it. So make sure that you have like the chase events turned on, but even if I started after here, we'll see just the patch itself would kind of slow down, but that note will continue to sound. But maybe I'm not understanding the question correctly, but let me know if it's if I'm misunderstanding. All right. You see Ben Tyerman asks, has anyone managed to get the Lexicon PCM native reverbs running on an M-chip Mac? This is a plug I can't leave behind. I paid a fortune for it years ago. Yeah, so Lexicon's been promising. I have the PCM native reverb. I'm kind of an old school Lexicon fan of 35 years. And so they're supposedly working on their VST3 versions. And if you go to the Lexicon forum, I think, it might be coming kind of with maybe, I think Harman had maybe acquired Flux plugins. So maybe it might be being worked on, but I don't think you're going to have success until Lexicon actually updates their plugins that have been updated in 4 years. So, but I understand the pain. I love my Lexicon reverbs, and I'm not able to run them on my personal studio computer as well as a result because they haven't been updated. All right. Let me find my spot. Sorry. Okay, so we see from Vince says edit Very Audio. Second clarification says I edit Very Audio Zoom done. I go to new track that's not been activated, Very Audio yet, and untouched track that has another zoom. Or simply, you can't do this, Very Audio Zoom bounce to track, edit Very Audio. You should see that zoom is back to default. Okay. All right, let's do 2 new tracks here just to make sure there's no Very Audio memory within the project. Okay, so take that. Okay, so it says edit Very Audio Zoom done. Get to new track that's not activated Very Audio yet, and untouched track that has another zoom. Okay, so let's say I'm here. Go to my Very Audio. I'm going to fill this out where we see measures 0, 1 through 10. Okay, so Very Audio hasn't been done on this track. You see the same time frame, 0, 1 through 10. I'm going to activate the Very Audio. All right, so it says I edit Very Audio Zoom, done. Go to a new track that has not activated Very Audio, and untouched track that has another zoom. So let me know if this is, so I did this, I zoomed in. Okay, so let's say I want to see 20 tracks, 20 measures. Come here. I see the same time zone. 20 measures, I'll put another track in. Let's do the Very Audio here. So no Very Audio yet. On this file, I come here and I still see the same time frame. So it looks like the zoom is consistent, showing kind of the same time frame. So, but let me know if I'm still misunderstanding. I see Gareth will resend it, the files. Thanks for that. All right, Gung Putranto asks, hi Greg, do you still enable ASIO guard looking at your fast computer? Sure. You know, it's your computer, whether it's fast or slow, can benefit from ASIO guard. So if you get to your audio system, always activate multiprocessing, activate ASIO guard. So, you know, there's no real consequences of not having ASIO guard disabled or enabled. So. All right, Grant Flooring asks, will I notice a significant reduction in CPU processing converting my surround quad scoring template tracks to quad family groups to quad stems to quad mix to stereo? So I don't think it's going to cause any significant performance degradation at all. So if you just kind of, just adding the additional bus, if you send your quad mix, so if you're doing it for monitoring purposes, you could do it in a control room, or if you're doing it just, for like another alternative, like deliverable bus, so you could just say, print the quad and print the stereo at the same time. I don't think you'll have a huge performance hit at all. And especially you have 384 gigs of RAM with the Mac Pro with 16 cores. All right, so we see Daniel Coppins says, Greg, was not clear in the template effects track question. When I add a new track, Cubase automatically adds all my effects tracks to the send section. I would like to turn this off. Okay, so I think this might be a preference. So when you come over here to settings, I think it's going to be under VST, where it's connect sends automatically for each newly created channel. So try disabling that preference. So again, go to your preferences or settings to VST and try unchecking or toggling connect sends automatically for each newly created channel and see if that makes a difference for you. Sorry for not understanding. See, Richard Willis says, wow, easier than I thought. All right, so George says, Greg, when I asked where the MIDI files are stored, my intention was this. I have various variations on one project. When I change MIDI in project Rock 12 and go back to an older version, Cubase uses the old MIDI files, right? So yeah, it would use whatever was saved in the previous version. So that would do it. And one other method that you might be able to use if you're kind of going back and forth and using kind of alternate versions is, let's say if I'm here, so let's say, okay, I want to, so let's say I have this is using like track versions. So let's say, and you can say, oh, okay, man, it's a great idea, but let me try something higher. You could just do new version. And then if you wanted to just kind of go back and forth between different versions within the same project, that way you could try out different ideas or have sketches, or if you're doing different editing stages. But if you go back, it sounds like, if you have if you did variations in one project, it's not going to automatically update it unless you saved it that way in the older projects. See, Richard Willis would say, I'm assuming the same for pianissimo to fortissimo. So yeah. And that was going back with the articulations, I believe. All right, and George's question, follow-up. So if I want the latest version of the MIDI files, I need to import that track from the newest version to an old version. So yeah, if you want that. And if you have both of them open, one of the great things of Cubase is you have multiple projects open. So you can say, okay, I'm here. I want to copy this. Let's go to a different project. And I could say, okay, now this is my active project. I want to come here. Let's add an instrument track. And I could just paste. So let's say we come here, and I could paste the parts. So you could, if you have the same instruments, you could just cut, copy, paste, or say, okay, I want to come here, and now I want to draw in a bunch of silly notes. So let's say I'm going. We could even just say, okay, I want to take. So I have this project that's not active. I can drag and drop data from one project into another project and activate it. So that's another method. So you could cut, copy, paste between projects or drag events from one project to another project. All right, sorry, my CPU, my chat field jumped on me. Find my spot. See, Grant Flooring says, trying to get away from my VEP slave computer setup and hearing that the Mac Studio is more than capable of running everything at the same machine. Bummer that a 5-year-old Mac Pro is already cracking. So, a lot of times what I've seen a lot of composers do and kind of migrate to, instead of using kind of like farm systems of instruments, is, just within their template, is just come over here and, just deactivate and activate tracks. And you could use a keyboard shortcut to just come over here and say, okay, I want to take this particular instrument, and you could disable the selected tracks, and then if you're not using it, and then say, okay, I want to do this, and then just hit a button and able to select a track and be able to play just like that. So, I think, I've seen kind of a shift within kind of the professional composing community to migrate to a disabled track format as opposed to moving on to maybe with your older machine with its processing capabilities, like a farmed out system for instruments. But, when you see composers doing big films on their laptops, it's pretty interesting to see. All right. All right, so we have a question from Babel. Is there a way to quickly write at the beginning of a MIDI recording where all the knobs and MIDI CCs are before I record, even the ones I don't touch? So there's a great MIDI plugin for this. So let's say if we come over here and we go to the MIDI inserts, and one of the plugins that we have is called MIDI Control. Okay, and what this will allow you to do is just say, okay, I want my modulation to be at 105. I want my expression to start at 80. So we could just kind of come right over here, say, I want my volume to be set to, and you could just change your MIDI CC. I want my volume to always be at 100. So this way, whenever you play the track, these settings will be at the very beginning. It doesn't have to be written into the part, but it could actually just be, but on playback, those MIDI CCs can automatically start from a known state without having to have those values. So again, just come to the MIDI inserts, and we'll come over here to MIDI control. And then you could have up to 8 values. And if you need to run more of those particular values, you could run a second instance to have 16 or 24 CC states automatically preserved so that it's starting at a known entry point as you're starting the particular project. All right. Okay. Okay, Babel just asks, is there a way to turn track versions into compable takes? Okay, so let's come over and I'll just create quick track version here to show this. All right, so I'm going to put this into just a quick, I'm going to send it to a group, and then we're going to record different track versions of it. All right, so I'm going to just play this a couple times. I'll put it just a couple measures for time's sake. Okay, so just come here, let me just hit. Okay, and let's just transpose this up a couple steps. All right, and let me do just a new version. All right, and we'll do one more new version here. All right, so we have 3 versions here. So let's say we have version 1, 2, and 3. All right, so if we want to do these into kind of a comparable format, what I'm going to do now is to come over here. Let's go to your project menu, and then we could say on track versions, I think we could create lanes from versions. And now at this point, when we go to our lanes, so now at that point we could just come over and do comping from your track versions. And we could conversely take our, so we could take our lanes and convert these to tracks by right clicking and say create tracks from lanes, but all of your track versions. So let's say when we come over and we have our different track versions, go to your project menu, to track versions, and create versions, create lanes from versions. And now when you open up the lanes, you could just comp away. Okay, Roland Stuff asks, hi Greg, what's the easiest way to copy across some but not all track settings from one track to several others? Just as an example, copying routing and inserts but not sends or channel gain. Thanks. Okay, so let's say I have a number of inserts over here. Let me just go to like a track preset. Okay, so I have like track presets here. I have another 2 audio tracks. Okay, so let's say I want to just grab like inserts. So I think that we could grab like our inserts here and just drag it to other tracks. Just like that. So whatever our inserts are for this particular one, we could just come right over there. So inserts, we could just drag the insert, hold down the Alt or Option key, and then you could drag your multiple inserts straight on top. So copying, routing, and inserts. So I think that as far as routing goes, it's, you know, it's not, so let's say this is going out to my left channel. So if I want, so it's not really a copyable thing, but if I want all of these selected tracks, if I hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, I could send them all to the same destination with routing, so it's not necessarily copied. So your inserts, you can just kind of drag the inserts tab, hold down the Alt or Option, and release on a different track like that. All right. So we just see from Ben Tyerman, how many tracks can you run in Cubase 14 Pro with that machine? Have you tried pushing it? So I'll just turn the volume down. I'll just pass some audio on a particular track. But let's say I haven't really tried to go crazy with it, but let's... So let's add an audio track, and I'll just put like an oscillator on it. So this will be as if we are, turn the volume down. So we can see just a little bit. And I will put that very faint. Let me just duplicate track. Duplicate tracks. Do this several times. So just audio tracks going on. We're at 224. So we're at 448. Let's take a look at my performance. All right, we're at 896 tracks now of audio. Let it duplicate itself here. So we're able to do 896 tracks pretty easily. Let's see if we can do 1792. All right, so that's 1,792 tracks. Let's see if we could double that. All right. So probably more than enough tracks for us. Let's see if we could do this without it. See if we could break it. As you can see from the CPU, it's not. All right, let's see if we could duplicate that. We'll see what happens. Curious now myself. All right, let's see how long it takes for us to kick in. So let's see if we do 1,000. This would be 3,584 tracks. Let's see if we can break it. All right, I'll move on to the next question to see. Innuendo 14, while we're waiting for this to do its thing. What is sound reference under the audio menu? I'm having a hard time finding any information about it. So I think the sound reference, like there's different plugins, like the tonal match, where if you have like, the same person that recorded a voiceover on one track and they perhaps used a different mic in a different location, and they're doing it on a different track, that the sound reference allows you to pick, like, this is the reference and we want all the tracks to use this as the reference point for the tonal match plugin. So and that plugin works phenomenally well. It's really great. All right. I think our next question, we may have to wait till we're done with this. Let's see, now I'm just curious if we could do. How much is it going to be able to do? All right. All right, let me see if I can open up, see if I can answer a question in Innuendo here real quick. Let's see. All right, let's see if this won't wig out too much. To answer next question in Innuendo, we'll come back to Cubase and see if it's rendered all the tracks. Okay, so since we're in Nuendo 14, we could see kind of our sound reference here in a second. But next question we're going to have, is there a way to change articulations from the expression map in the inspector? If not, what's the best way to change articulations using the mouse? Okay, so just create empty here quickly. All right, so I add an instrument track. We'll come over to Howling Sonic. Okay, so if we want to switch articulations, let's say we'll go to our cello. All right, let me see if this is. All right, so when we click on the event and we go to the expression map, we'll say import key switches. And then I think that you might be able to select it. Let's see if you could select it right from here. And you could always kind of select, let me just, thought that you might be able to select it right from. You could always switch from directly in the instrument. Let me see if Cubase is. All right, so here's. All right, so it finished. All right, so we have 3,000. I won't go beyond this, but 3,584 tracks of audio playing back with the test tone generator. So that should be enough tracks, I think, for most people. All right, so I'll go ahead and close this project. That's pretty impressive. So, and looks like I could do more. So I'll see if I could break it over time. Okay, so let me just exit out of Nuendo here real quick. But yeah, so in Nuendo, if you go to your audio, and you go to like the reference, we just add an audio track here. That's going to be just for the reference for the tonal match plugin. All right. All right, let me just jump back here. So let's go activate this project here, see if we could get it to switch. So I guess if you want to switch with the mouse, it's kind of, let's see if we get, let me see if there's any modifier keys that allow us to switch from there. But and if they are set up, so you could just kind of click, here to switch the articulation. So now if I come and once it's kind of sent the key switch, see if you got so you play around, but I think that there might be a way of selecting it. I may have to come over here and see if we could Switch seems like you should be able to, but I'll work on that for Friday. All right. All right, Babel asks, is there a key command in Cubase where I can input what bar I want my playhead to go to? So I think if we go to transport, you could enter position, enter project cursor position. So try, I think it's, so if we're here, let's say we go to Shift P, I think it's, we just check my key commands here. Yeah, so Shift P. So let's say I want to come here, Shift P, type in, and you notice that when we come here that the we'll see that this becomes available, like the enter. So when I hit 22, we can now just jump to particular. So I'm going to set this to bars and beats. So let's say now I want to go to, I hit Shift plus the letter P, like position. I want to go to bar 21, hit 21, go there, Shift plus P. I want to go to bar 12, and it will immediately go there. So Shift plus the letter P. And then you can navigate directly, move the playhead position directly to that that position that you've defined. All right, so Babel says, thanks, Greg. Missed you last month. Yeah, so it's good to be back. I was on vacation for a week, and then I had to go to corporate meetings. We had a grand opening for our office at Yamaha in Buena Park, so it's great. I think after 50 years, they finally have redone the office. It's a beautiful office. You ever get a chance to see it in Buena Park, California, right off 91. All right. Babel also asks, all right, it says, also, is there a workaround for warping when there are tempo ramps? All right, so it's just a new project. I want to drop in a loop. Something that's not a one shot. Okay, so let's say I want to take this. All right, so let's create a tempo track. All right, and we'll make it a ramp. Okay, so let's see if we could do, let's come over here. I'm just going to create warp markers. So if we go to real-time processing, I'm going to create my warp markers from the hit points. We'll go into our free warp. Okay, so I'm going to turn snap off and see if that makes a difference as we free warp. But if I want this event, so even though we're in the middle of a tempo ramp, it seems to free warp as expected. So let's see if we do it with the grid. So that seems to work as expected, but let me know if I understand again, if I'm misunderstanding. All right, so let's see, another clarification from Vincent. Sorry if I'm being dense. Should have mentioned that it is horizontally zoom I'm talking about, pardon me, not vertically. Also have in our window and not in the lower zone. Okay, so I think if you're doing very audio in independent windows, that the zoom is not going to is not going to have a reference. So let's say if we go to okay, so when I go here, and let's say if we do our very audio on this, all right, so let's say we will come over here, we'll go to very audio, and if we're in a standalone window, all right, so let's say we have this where we're seeing, say, measure 56 through 58 2 bars. Okay, and now if we go to this window here, so let's do our very audio here. I'll just move that over here. So yeah, so I think if it's in different windows, so let's say I have this going on, and now all right, so right now we see measures 29 through 42, so 13 bars on that segment. And we see 29 through 42 here. So I see the same vertical or the same horizontal zoom, the same scale going back and forth. So if I go to this one, I'll just add another one in here. So let's say I'm in my full scale window, 29 through 42. There's no very audio analysis. I come there, 29 through 42. So it seems the same whether it's in an independent window or a separate window. So let me know if I'm doing something differently. All right, so we see Alleyway 321 says he was having so many issues with Cubase for a couple months. However, as soon as I updated my NVIDIA driver, those issues have disappeared. Woo! So important to keep the drivers up to date. So, yeah. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped. Okay, so we see from Mesa Guitar Guy says, I kind of wish there was a simple mode in 14 Pro. So, a lot of times, you can come over here and, you want a simpler transport. You could have a simpler transport. You don't want to see all of these functions. You can set up your sections and choose to hide. So, you don't have to use all the capabilities and functions of Cubase to be working with it. So, you can treat it very simply if you want. Everything is there. Most people choose not to turn off all the advanced features, but if you wanted to treat it as if you were doing a Beatles session on 4 tracks and only work on 4 tracks of audio, you can have Cubase work that way if you want to. Okay, Alleyway321 says, I've read that a minimum of 12 cores is recommended for Cubase. Is that the recommendation still accurate? So there's lots of people running fewer cores. It just, the more cores you have, the more you can do, the longer your computer will last. So. Okay, Rudy Visenberg asks, my question is, what's the best way to give a track a human feel? So if you were doing like a really basic drum part, or other parts is, just doing some simple quantizing with swing on it. So there's, a lot of different randomization functionality, but, if you have, let's say if I come over here and we have just like a simple I could come over here, let's double click on the event, go to quantize, and then we'll see quantize swing. So if we want to just come over and be able or just going to the quantize panel here and say, okay, I want to quantize this to, let's say, eighth notes, and I want to apply a swing to the eighth notes. So I could just come right over here. So that's kind of an extreme example, but let's say we want to quantize based on played with that drummer a lot, so you could adjust, even just kind of coming in here and being able to adjust like your swing percentage and say, okay, I want to do 16th notes. So let's say you go from 0, to applying like 50%, you can make a huge difference, and you can do that same quantizing functionality for audio or MIDI. All right, so we see from George, yes, I get it, Greg. Great advice on copying and pasting between projects. I keep forgetting I have more than one project open at the same time. Thanks. Okay. All right, Babylonia Studio asks, if you use that MIDI control, can I still change those CC values as I record? And this just preserves the start point. So yeah, when you use like just the MIDI control, that's just going to be like exactly for the start point. So you could write in your MIDI CC data after that, but it gives it kind of an initial starting point. So it's really great for libraries. All right, so Ben Tyerman says, have you tried a Snapdragon PC yet? Are they equal to Mac M4? So I don't think it's quite up to an M4 yet, but it is surprisingly good. So there's great stuff going on Snapdragon PCs. So definitely something to keep your eyes on. All right, so we have Pastoral Apologetics says, love the world of Cubase, anxiously awaiting Absolute 7. Hello from Southeast Texas. All right, Babylonia Studio says, hey Greg, what does the metering channel in the control room or console room do in Nuendo? So Nuendo will have the ability of just being able to send out just a dedicated path, and the intention is like if you have hardware metering, that your hardware metering would just kind of mimic your outputs, and those outputs would automatically be fed into a metering device without having to define another output or another bus. So in more kind of post-production houses where they have external metering, hardware metering, that's kind of more of an issue before we introduce supervision. So that is intended to use with like an external hardware metering where it's just a bus that's automatically created that you don't really have to set it up. All right, Babylonia Studio asks, is there a way to make Quick Link on by default? I could turn it on and leave it for a project, but when reopening the project, it doesn't remember that Q-Link was turned on. I think that there is a lot of unintended consequences that could happen with having the metering, having the Quick Link turned on that could mess up projects for people. If you're making edits across one track and it's being applied to 13 tracks without you turning it on. So I think that's kind of the intention, that it doesn't kind of create problems for you by having a state on that could affect lots of other processes and edits. See, Grant Flooring says, thanks for taking the time to go through all these tips with us. See you in the next one. Yeah, look forward to seeing you on many more live streams. All right. See, DJFK says, settle that score. And Mezza Guitar Guy says, I've got 250 vocal tracks on one song. And aren't you the one that was asking for simpler use? So, all right. See, Tim K says, this is so cool, Greg, on Readback. This is when you're making 1 million audio tracks. Yeah, plus OBS in the background, as Jazz Dude mentioned. So you say Grant Flooring says, can you do the same test with the instrument tracks loaded with Halion? So I did it with the Montage ESP plugin. I think we had 980 voices playing. So I could do something similar for next time. All right, so we see Visions of Morpheus. In the arranger chain, is there a way to have a larger button to click on when playing live rather than the little green triangle? All right, so if we have, let's say if we have an arranger chain here. All right. Right, so one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is when you come here, so you could kind of click here to do the arranger chains, but one of the things that you could do also is that a lot of people aren't aware of. Let's say if you go to your MIDI remote, I'll come over here, is you could actually have different buttons that will be programmed. So if you go to like the arranger track, so you could actually trigger up to 20 different arranger track events directly here from different, keyboard shortcuts or MIDI remote streams right there. So while the button may not be big, you could program a controller or just use a generic MIDI remote and just have keys on your keyboard automatically select your different. See Grant Flooring on the, he says, 1,700 tracks was already impressive. So. All right, let me get to, because I have to leave in about 20 minutes for kind of a NAMM event in DC. But let me get to some of the questions that were mailed in. Thanks for all the great comments from everyone and great questions. And if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. So, all right, first question mailed in was, how to see a loudness meter without using a plugin. Okay, so if we have, let's say, our meter going on here, so let's say, all right, so we can see our meter and we see our actual loudness. We see our dB meter here, and we have different dB meter scales. But if we want to see loudness metering, all we have to do is click directly here, and we could see our loudness metering show up directly there. So we could see it in a plugin if you want, or Steinberg released it SLM 128 as a plugin, but it's just part of the control room for different metering options right there. All right, let me open up a project that I had set up for some of the other questions. All right, it says I have a chord track. I'm wondering why some chord symbols I have space between the root chord and tension, as you can see in the picture. For example, D minor 7 looks kind of strange. So does H minor 7 flat fifth and F sharp. So I couldn't recreate this. And I'll just show. Person provided the actual chords, so I actually mimicked the particular chords in this case, and in their picture, like they would see, like as we look at it, like there was a definite space between the seventh and flat fifth. So, but mine is kind of, it almost looks like you would like hit like a space bar to get that function. Let me just look one other area. So if you go to settings to event display chords and pitches, so let me see if I come over here and change some of those. It doesn't seem to, but these are kind of my settings, and as you can see, like I'm not sure if you have any custom chord settings, but when I put these in, they're all kind of very consistent. So maybe if you're able to actually send like the project, I'd be happy to see what it looks like on my end with that. All right, so we had a question on the last live stream. Is the mix console undo history slower in version 14 than version 12? All right, so I actually downloaded it. Said I would get Cubase 12 downloaded. So let's open up this project. So we're going to do the same project in 14. I'm going to open up Cubase 12. So we'll come over here to the Finder. Okay, so we're opening up the same project. All right, so here we are in Cubase 12. All right, so I'm going to, let's go to the bass track. So I want to adjust the volume. I want to adjust the EQ. Let's go to a channel strip. Just deny that for now. Let's get to a channel strip. Let's put a noise gate on. Let's adjust the two top parameters there. All right, so now I'm going to hit Alt and let me adjust some of the faders here. Okay, so we'll open up the bass and I'm going to hit Alt Z. All right, now let's do the same in Cubase 14. So let's go to the bass. All right, move the fader. Let's move the EQ, I think we did. Let's go to the channel strip. Let's adjust the noise gate. Let's move up those two values. Let's move to faders. We'll open up the channel in Cubase 14. So it looks the same to me. So I don't see any difference between Cubase 14 and Cubase 12 with regards to that. All right, so we had a question. Let me just jump back. I'll exit out Cubase 12. Says on the May 2nd live stream, you answered my question, what's the difference between focus quick controls and quick controls? Thank you for that. But I'd like to know how to set the MIDI remote up for this. I've got the Arturia Mark 261. I added focus quick control to my knobs 1 through 8, as you mentioned on the live stream. When opening a VST to specific quick control, that VST will respond correct. So yes, that will work. So right now, I will open up, let's say, a RetroLog instance. And when we go, I'm going to go to my MIDI remote here. Let's open up a RetroLog. So again, when we open up RetroLog, I'll just go to patch. And my MIDI remote is set up for my focus quick controls here. So now, as I adjust my focus quick control knobs, we can see that these will automatically adjust parameters inside of the synthesizer. And if I go to another plugin, it's going to do that. So the next question is, but what if I add quick control functions to these knobs? I'm not sure which one to use. And is this MIDI channel dependent, or does it influence the quick controls? Or do I need a different MIDI controller with 8 extra knobs for using quick controls and focus quick controls? So what I would do if you wanted specific quick controls for something on this track is, so I could have, when we go into our MIDI mapping, I could choose to come over here and say, okay, I want my focus quick control. I'll just do this, come here. So I want my focus quick control on the knob. And let's say if I have faders, I want this to be just my quick controls. So I could come over here, let's go down, and we'll find our quick controls. Or let me just see if we can do it from here. We might have to do it in our spot. All right, so we could go to selected track quick control. So I move this. Now I could have the track quick controls on the fader and the focus quick controls on the knobs. So this way, no matter what, I have my go-to parameters for the track quick controls on faders, and the knobs can be set to focus quick controls. Now, sometimes you may hit a button on your controller, and when you hit a button on a controller, that may take 8 knobs, and you hit a button, and that may bank them to transmit 8 separate MIDI controller messages. So if you have like a bank button, I think the Arturia, you might have 3 buttons for the knobs. I don't have one. Just looking at it online, I seem to remember that there was 3 modes. One was for like MIDI CC, one was for control, one was for controlling like the Arturia plugins. But if those transmit different MIDI CCs, you could take the same knobs and switch the mode and use kind of the focus quick controls and track quick controls independently. Or if you have knobs and sliders, use the sliders for track quick controls, the knobs for focus quick controls. So I hope that makes sense. All right, so we have a question. It says, when hitting record, you can choose with or without count in. Is there a factory functionality which makes it possible to count in when playing a track? Okay, so let's say I want to start playing for measure 4. So let's say if we're here, so I want to start playing let's say for measure 5. Okay, so right now it will start playing immediately. I think if we come over here that we could have a pre-count. So if we come here, so we have the metronome, we have a count in. So now if we count in, I'll just revert this project here real quick. That now, let me just see if it's, let me just see if we have to activate it. All right, so let's come over here. I think, all right, so we have the click during count in. All right, so let me just, all right, and I think that we could also activate, let's see, pre-roll and post-roll. So let's say now we could right click on the counter here. So let's say, all right, so if I just do this, we could say we want to activate our pre-roll in. So let's say we want to make this 2 bars. So we're going to start at measure 5. So we could just play like 2 measures and do a pre-roll if you wanted to do that. So try going to the transport panel and activating the pre-roll. All right, so we had a discussion last time about, I think it was a user that was running Serum 2, and there's a preset, and they were thinking that maybe the Cubase was sending the wrong level, and because the Serum preset wasn't clipping in the channel fader, but it was clipping in the master fader, and they're curious if Cubase had a calibration issue. So I just ran a couple tests here. So let's say we want to do like a test tone. So let me just turn that down. All right, so we can see that when we do our test tone here, so let's come over. All right, and we look at our level here, so we don't have any level differences. We're at minus 18 on the test tone on the track, and it's outputting directly to minus 18. So there's no calibration issues there. I also wanted to do kind of the same test using a virtual instrument. So I just loaded up an instance of Hallian, so very simple Hallian patch where there weren't going to be filters involved. So if we just kind of listen to it, we just turn this up. So we see that this is coming from an instrument. So it's just one single oscillator. I'll just turn on one oscillator here. And again, we can see that the levels, we have minus 4.1, minus 4.1. So it doesn't seem to me that there's any calibration issues, that the levels coming from the instruments are going to be, whether it's from an audio track, there's no calibration issues. So I would say it's probably going to be something. There's lots of things, obviously, in a synthesizer that could affect gain, but if you take it at its simplest level, doesn't seem to be any gain discrepancies between the channel and the master. So I would lean towards maybe investigating within the particular instrument if there's anything in the project that's kind of leading you to work that way. That could also be a factor. All right, let me jump back to some live questions before we wrap up in just a couple minutes. Sorry, I have to leave a little earlier today because I have an event to go to near the U.S. Capitol tonight. All right. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. Okay. All right. Paul Boco Studio asks, "Hi Greg, Cubase 14 UR44C during mixing. How do I mute, monitor the output, and use headphones only?" So if you have the UR44C, you could set up the headphone channel. So let's say you take output 2. Like within the DSP Mix FX software, set your headphones for output 2, and at this point, if you go to your audio connections, so go to audio connections, go to your control room, you could say my headphones are going out of outputs 3 and 4. Outputs 3 and 4 are routed to headphone output 2 on the UR44. And my speakers are going out of outputs 1 and 2. And then all you have to do is simply just kind of turn off, so if you go to your main, you could simply turn off the main and then listen to the phones channel. So now you're just listening to the phones channel, turn off the main, the phones channel is active, and now you could listen to your speakers on and off right there. All right, so you see DJ FK says, learn something. All right, Grant Flooring says, boom, this is a great shortcut. All right. All right, so with that, I think I'm going to have to get ready for my event, but I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. If you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We'll be back on Friday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And with that, I want everyone to please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Friday. Thank you very much. Goodbye.